my friend Andrew, and I like didn't intend necessarily like to come out to him. I was trying to figure out things myself, and I was like on like in the depths of like Tumblr looking at like queer bi blogs and different posts and things, and then he came over. He was hanging out at my apartment and we were gonna watch a movie, and when he opened my laptop, that was what was up, and he was like, wait, what? And I was like, yeah, I guess I'm not straight, I'm figuring it out. So I guess, yeah, Andrew was like the first person I came out to, and like he's also queer, so we like talked through it, and he was just like, and he like gave me a big hug. I was dating a guy at the time, and so when I came out to him, that was like weird, because I was like, so I think I like women, and like it was just like such a weird thing to bring up to someone when you're like in a heterosexual relationship, and you're like, well, how did you figure this out? I'm like, He was fine with it. He was just like, okay. He was very like receptive to it. At the end of the day, I don't think he was as understanding as he wanted to be or as I wanted him to be. I think the label queer is wonderful because it's a label that doesn't function as a label. Because if you have 4 or 5 people line up and everyone identifies as queer, they're all gonna have a different explanation of what that means. Before I came out, there was actually like a girl I had a class with, and I had what I like called for a while, like, oh, I have such a girl crush on this girl in my class. Looking back on it, I'm like, I was so dumb. Just like, wow. So then I was just like, oh my God, this girl is so pretty, like, wow. What I first thought, I was like, okay, well maybe I'm just like bi-romantic. I'm romantically attracted to women and to men, but only sexually attracted to men. Because what I felt, I was like, this feels like an elementary school crush. Like, I want to hold hands with this person and snuggle and like watch movies and stuff. I don't necessarily like feel a sexual attraction. And then over time that changed. The way I described it to a couple people, I was like, it feels like I went through puberty again. Like with myself. I tried to come out to my mom. We were like shopping one day and she wrote it off and was like, haha, yeah, whatever. And she was like, it just kind of sounds like what you want is friendship. I think you just might be lonely. I think you just like need better friends. I was like, no. I came out to my sister and she was like, I think you're doing this for attention. And she's like, I think because you have like so many friends that identify as like LGBT that you like feel left out and you just like want to fit in. I'm like, do you hear yourself? I'm trying to fit in to a marginalized community because that's going to make life easier. I am already a woman of color. Let's add queer on that. Great. I like repeated that back to her a while ago and she was like, yeah, that was awful. I specifically didn't tell my dad because like my mom and my sister weren't that receptive to it. And then at dinner one night, my sister brought it up and I was like, okay, I guess I have to like explain this now. And then my dad ended up taking it really well, like the best. He was like, so what you're saying is that like, you might date women or like you will date women at some point. And I was like, yeah. And he's like, okay. And that was it. And I was like, oh, you took that the best. Cool. So I was at a wedding like about a month ago with my family in Thailand. And leading up to this wedding, I had expressed a ton of like anxieties to my parents, particularly my dad. And I was like, hey, because he was briefing me on like the protocol that I was to follow because it's like conservative Indian culture. And so, you know, me being as liberal as I am doesn't quite fly. And my dad was like, yeah, no like feminist talk, no LGBTQ anything, you absolutely none of that, like no controversial conversation topics. And I'm like, then what am I supposed to talk about? That's all I like to talk about. It's something that like, if I were out to like my extended family, I would be like judged very harshly, but not only me, like my parents. It's something that any like wrong move like I make or like my sister makes or whatever, it reflects poorly on my parents and then it reflects poorly on my grandparents. And it's a very like intergenerational, like hierarchical like thing. Particularly in Sindhi culture, which is like the type of Indian I am, it's a very, very judgmental culture and everyone is in everyone's business all the time. And like the concept of like censorship in that sense, like personal censorship, not only with what I say, but like how I act, how I present myself, just really makes me like uncomfortable, because I can't be me. When like I was saying, like my dad was giving me like the outline of like protocol I was supposed to follow at the wedding, like when I was around, like surrounded by family. And I was like, Dad, if I followed every single thing you just said to a T, there would be nothing left of me. I would just be this walking like empty shell with like my face on it. And that notion that like that is like this role that I'm supposed to play was like frustrating and disheartening. And like over the course of like a couple different conversations I had with my dad and my mom, like they started to really understand that. Like, the more I bring queer like discourse into familial conversation, they're just like much more receptive to it. One of the hardest things for me was just like getting comfortable with like acknowledging it out loud and saying out loud. And now I just like run around and yell about it. I definitely have a much, much stronger sense of like who I am, and like this is kind of existential, but like why I'm here. And like what I am doing with my life, I guess. I'm just very unapologetically myself now. And I'm a much happier person because of it.
The initial time I came out, probably, I kept to myself for all of high school. But my first year at college, a lot of my fellow peers were discovering themselves, you know, coming out themselves and talking to each other and like, wait, like I think this is what I am. And listening to all of them, I thought, well, you know, everyone else is doing it here. You know, it's Smith is all women's college, so I'm in more of an enclosed environment where I'm more comfortable around like women as well. And I thought, well, if anyone else is doing it, then why can't I? You know, so my first year, I think, with one of my friends, actually my closest friend still, over lunch, I just came out to her. I was like, well, I think I'm definitely not straight, but, you know, I think I'm queer, you know, I like guys, but I also really like women. She goes, well, there you go. You know, congratulations, that kind of thing. A lot of experiences I've had at home were mostly, you know, hush hush, you don't talk about these kind of things, you know. Coming from an Asian American family where the focus primarily is on school, it's on academics, it's on, you know, how well you do. Very little is placed on how you identify. They never really gave me any sort of room to explore. Going into high school, first 2 years, still sheltered, I was like, okay, I'm straight, this is what I'm supposed to do, I'm supposed to like guys. Junior year hit and I was like, wait a second, there is something going on where, you know, guys are great, but if I'm more attracted to personalities, then why not? You know, why not women? They're just as great. I was in a marching band and there was a lesbian couple and the response for them wasn't great. You know, they were all like whispered about, people pointed and laughed, and you know, I saw that reaction. I thought, well, this can't be, you know, I can't really do that. So I didn't do anything for most of my high school. So going into college without my family around me, always surrounded by them, with close friends who were also discovering themselves, you know, I came out and was met with a lot of support. I'm in like an inclusive, safe community where I'm not going to be judged. You know, my family isn't here to keep an eye on me, and you know, the kind of, I guess, strict standards set by the Asian American community, they don't really pertain to us here in college. So it's a place where we can just feel safe. You know, when I tell people that I realized in college, they all say, oh, is it because Smith is all women? Like, would you have done it differently if you went to a co-ed? Going to an all women's, it's definitely changed the speed, I guess, of which I came out, because I wouldn't have been as secure or felt as safe or as comfortable. You know, in a co-ed, I probably still would have come out in, you know, if I had gone to Hunter or something, like another co-ed college, but it would have been harder for me to find my community. It would have been harder for me to find someone who's also queer and say, this is what I am, this is what I think I am, and then have them still support me throughout that. My younger cousin, she's the only one that knows. Parents know. I've tried dropping 1 or 2 hints and they haven't. I think it just went right over their heads. My aunts, uncles know, but I think My younger cousin, her sister, I might come out to soon, but I hesitate because they're religious. I think I came out to her on Snapchat, actually, now that I think about it. And I remember she sent me this picture back with like her eyes bugging out, like capital letters like WHAT, like 4 exclamation marks, as much as she could fit in that text box. And I said, please don't hate me. And she sent another picture back and said, no, I'll still always love you. My parents are, I don't feel like they're going to be very supportive. They have said like a few homophobic things, and they're very old, so I feel like they're immigrants, so they're coming from another culture, another society where it's frowned upon or it's just not seen. So I don't know how they would take it. My aunts, my uncles, you know, they're the older generation. They're like in their 60s or 70s at this point, where they're still, no, you have to find a man, and you have to get married by a certain age, and you have to have children. So it's going to be a hard subject to breach with them no matter what. You know, even in the media when you talk about, you know, legalization or couples that are banned, or even like the shooting that happened in the nightclub, you know, they never really look at it as like something that's serious. Yeah, I probably will have to come out to them at some point soon, within the next 2 years at least. I'm definitely not looking forward to it, much less when the rest of my family finds out also. But, you know, my parents are the kinds where if something happens, they don't like to spread it. So if they might keep it hush-hush between the 3 of us, and they won't ever tell my aunts or uncles or anyone else. But, you know, yeah, I think they would probably tell me, no one has to know about this. It could go either well, or it could go horribly wrong. So honestly, it's 50-50 at this point. They probably won't understand it. I can't see them ever being able to understand it just yet. But, you know, right now, I think they probably would just flat out. Their thing would most likely be why, not why can't you choose. It's just trying to reason my understanding. I think they could eventually understand, but I'm gonna have to ask for help on that, for other people to come in and just sit them down or at least explain to them, because one of my dad's friends, her son is transgender, and she's very active in the Asian American Pacific Islander, like LGBTQ parent community, where they're parents of children that are within the spectrum also. And if anyone's accepting, that woman would be, and she is like a second mother to me. So I'm hoping she'll be able to explain to my dad, and then throughout that, maybe gain an understanding and also accepting. Honestly, the way I came out, I don't know if I would change anything. I mean, I've been doing it quietly, like bit by bit. You know, I don't want any surprises, like big surprises for my family.
I identify as genderqueer or non-binary. It was sort of a slower process, I suppose. I started using both she and they pronouns around 10th or 11th grade, once they were sort of recognized more, but just sort of let people use them, and most people just used she, which was one of the main reasons I switched to just using they, not because I don't identify at all as a woman or with like the women's community. I go to a women's college, so that's very much a part of my life. But because I found that when I just said she or they, people only used she. Coming to college was a big transition for that, because I met a lot more non-binary people and became really good friends with a lot of them, and started to see that some of the things that I've been experiencing for a while was something that was not just something everyone who is not straight experiences. It's actually something that was more of a gender issue, not just a sexuality question. My friends at school, I started to tell them that I just wanted to use they, them, and then probably my sister was the next person I told. I was a lot more nervous about being trans, just because especially non-binary identities I think are really hard for a lot of people to grasp. My dad had made some jokes about they, them pronouns. He's an English teacher, and I don't think he really got how serious I was about this, and he's just sort of making dad puns and like referring to himself as we, and I was like, okay, this kind of isn't a funny thing to me. Later on, once he realized that, he took it very seriously and like totally changed his tune, but it was just sort of a like trying to understand where I was at, and I didn't really know how to explain how much this is affecting my life. My mom also holds very tight to women's identity and like sisterhood, and like grew up very feminist, very much like an activist for women's rights and all that kind of stuff, so I knew it would be hard for her to not see me as entirely a woman. She's actively working on it, which is all that I can ask. You know, adults in my life still have a fairly hard time. They slip up. Very luckily for me, I was born with a gender-neutral name. I didn't have to change my name, so that's made it a lot easier, I think, for them, but they still struggle a lot with pronouns. Yeah. I've also just found it difficult to sort of explain that even though these things are happening, that doesn't mean I'm moving towards being a boy. I feel like a lot of the time there's like eyes on me being like, we're just waiting, and I'm like, it's not gonna happen. Like, it's really not. This is not like an in-between stage. My parents have been really supportive. They've done their best, is all that I can say. Doesn't mean it's been perfect, doesn't mean that there haven't been microaggressions fairly frequently, and that I don't get frustrated with them, but their hearts are in the right place. So, dysphoria is something that I have a very, very hard time defining. I guess one of the main things I can identify it is being incredibly self-conscious of the way that your gender comes off to other people. I really, really struggled with getting top surgery for a long time about whether or not I wanted to get it, mostly for political reasons, because I felt like by getting top surgery, I was letting society dictate how my body was supposed to look in order to be the gender that I identify as. My presentation has sort of been like a slow, gradual change. So I started changing my presentation and like playing with the way that I presented long before I identified as non-binary. So it wasn't like I came out as non-binary and then I changed the way I looked. Going to a women's college was a little complicated. Luckily, I was surrounded by non-binary people at this women's college. Surprisingly enough, it's probably the most concentrated group of trans people I've ever met at a women's college. Barnard came out with a trans policy the summer after I came out that rubbed me a little bit the wrong way. My peers, and not even them, but faculty members and administrators, everyone was incredibly supportive. I work for the Office of Admissions now, and they very much know that I identify as non-binary, and I've never been misgendered by any of my bosses who all work in admissions, which has been truly phenomenal because I was really, really concerned in applying for that job that I wouldn't even get it because I appeared to be very queer or not what a traditional woman or women's college student would look like. We found a place that I feel like I have people that I have things in common with, and even if we have entirely different interests, we can still have conversations about things and we can still find common ground. One of the only things I could probably say to my past self is chill with the labels, because that was something that really took over my life, and I've talked to a lot of younger people who are like, I really don't know what I am, like all of these things, and we get so stuck in these categories, and I completely understand the need to identify a certain way because identity politics are complicated, but they're important. A very cool thing about being non-binary, which is also very frustrating, is that there are a lot of terms that don't exist for us. And that can be something that like really complicates identity. Like when you're in a relationship, what do you call someone? If you have a sibling, like there are a lot of words just end up sounding very formal and forced. So something I've had fun with is like people I have those relationships with where there aren't really words for coming up with ones. And that sort of relieved some of the pressure for me. Like my partner really didn't like the word partner, but she really wanted to respect my identity. So she sometimes refers to me as her they friend, which is just bizarre. And like, of course she can only refer to me as that when she's around people that like understand that that's a joke and like whatever. My sister and I refer to each other as sibsters instead of siblings. So just sort of playing with language and redeveloping it, I think is something that can be really exciting about coming out and figuring out places that you want to be and words that you want to identify with, not just as labels, but as different relationships to other people that can make them seem sort of unique and your own.
The first person I told was a friend In college, we went on a walk. I was extremely nervous because I had texted her. I was like, hey, we need to talk. I broke down in tears, and I'll remember her response was I don't know if being gay is right or wrong, but I know you are a good person, so it must be something good. So that's what she said. While I was in the closet, I thought it was extremely wrong to be gay. That's all I heard my entire life. I grew up in an environment where it was completely wrong to be gay. I'm a Southern Baptist son, and so I heard sermons every now and then from how wrong it was. I went through the stages of not even knowing that I was gay. I just had I didn't have interest in girls, and I was trying to figure it all out. And then when I found out what was up with me, I was like, oh shoot. So I started trying to pray it away, and then I was in denial. I would try to pray it away, and I would try to date a bunch of girls to try to prove that I was straight, or when people would say, call me gay, I'd be like, no, I'm not, kind of thing, very defensive about it. And it was a lot of inner turmoil of not accepting myself and being scared to come out, because I knew what would happen when I came out, and it was just scary, hard, and a lot of internal struggle coming to accept it. I had a ton of pressure from family and friends growing up to be straight, because that's what I was supposed to do. I told my brother first that summer, and then I told my dad I was gay. Well, I told him I was bisexual first because I thought that'd be easier for him to handle. And I told him the day I moved back to college for my sophomore year. And at that time, I told him I would keep it a secret and not tell anyone. And I was like, just don't tell anyone, it'll just stay between us. This is just something that I wanted you to know, and I don't think it's wrong. At that time, he was like, I still love you. And don't worry, I won't tell anyone. I went back to college and everything was fine. But they were the only two that knew in my family. So I went back to college. Everything's fine. I'm starting to tell friends one by one. I had my first kiss. My first kiss ever was when I was 19. It was with a guy. I dated a bunch of girls in high school, but I didn't kiss any of them. I think I always broke up with them before it ever got that far. As I started coming out to more people, started getting word around, I called my sister and I told her that I was gay, and her response was like, are you sure? And I was like, yeah, I'm pretty sure. And then the next day, I tried to space it out so I could emotionally bear for all of it, because I knew I have 5 family members, and so it was Randall, Dad, Tiffany, and the next day I called Ryan, my little brother, and he did not take it well. I went from easiest to hardest when coming out, but he didn't take it very well. He said that he felt like I had lied and cheated to him all my life, and did I not feel ashamed of it for lying, and that he felt like an idiot for standing up to people. He was like, I got in fights with people when they told me you were gay, and he was like, I defended you and everything. He took it very hard, very personally, and my response was, I was like, what else was I supposed to do? I sent my mom a very long Facebook message, which I know may have been cowardly, but I didn't know how else to tell her. And it was very long, telling her all these things, that I loved her, that I went through the whole process of my entire life of coming to terms with thinking that homosexuality was okay. I was first I didn't know, and then I did know, my first crush, and then trying to pray it away, being in denial, trying to just never act on it, thinking about celibacy, all these things of trying not to be gay. But then at the very last paragraph, I was like, but I'm tired of living this way, and I want to be true to myself, and I don't think it's wrong, and I'm gay. And she sent back a message. She's like, my heart is breaking. I'm sorry you decided to leave the family. I didn't decide to leave the family. I never said. I told her in the letter, I was like, I want everything to be how it was before. I want us to still be family, still get together for holidays. Because I knew how she would respond. So I was prefacing all of that by saying, I want to get together for holidays still. I want us to be close. I still want to be a part of the family. And her response was, I'm sorry you chose to leave the family. And the next day I got a text message. She was like, because of your life choices, we're taking away full support. So car insurance, car payments, paying for my college, helping pay for that, everything. She said, we're pulling that away. My dad then used that Sunday, the following Sunday, He got up in front of his church, he's a Southern Baptist pastor. He read a letter that said, because of my son's decisions, I no longer feel like I can support him. And then, so basically denouncing me that he was no longer going to support me, because in the Southern Baptist tradition, if you can't control your kids, then you can't lead a church, kind of thing. So he had to, it's like he had to either show support for me or give up his job, or denounce me and keep being a pastor. At least that's the way I see it. And so he chose to not support me anymore. And my mom, before that even happened, she's like, you don't even know what this is going to do to our ministry. My mom told me, because I'm gay, I'm going to destroy her years of ministry that she's been working for. And that was hard. That was all put on me. And they're fine. They're doing fine, as far as I know. I don't talk to my parents anymore. My older brother, he said, your family is the people that you surround yourself with who accept you for who you are. He's like, you're stressing out too much about the family accepting you. You need to make your own family, because mom and dad aren't going to accept you. My brother said, mom and dad still love you, they just don't know how to show it. It hurt. It hurt when he told me that, because I don't feel loved by them. I don't feel loved by any of my biological family. I was homeless. I didn't have a place to go home. I still have my dorm room, but they don't let you stay there during the holidays or summer or anything. So I had to find places to stay and find means to make money it sounds dramatic, but I had to find ways to make money for food and stuff. I reached out for help. I guess, I don't know, people reached out to me more so, because people were trying to reach out to help, but I was on this crazy downward spiral that I was like, I can't control anything. I'm so out of control. Because even though I knew my family was going to disown me, I didn't know how painful it was going to be, or the effects it would have on me. I started going to the LGBTQ support group of Carson Newman, which is a thing. It's not really like an official thing, but it's a thing. And I also met, his name's Preston Carter Fields. I met him through a church that I visited once, and it's funny. It's just funny to me, smiling, because I grew up thinking gays cannot be Christian, and I've met most of my best gay friends at church. But he's a brother. We call each other brother. We text every day. Preston told me, he was like, all my life I prayed for a little brother, and you're an answer to my prayers, which really made me feel very validated and loved, because Preston's the one person in the world since coming out that I feel is genuinely my family. I wouldn't have gotten this far if it weren't for the LGBT community family I have. And I mean that. I was on the verge of suicide several times. I was about to take measures to just end it all, and before it happened, I got a text message from Preston that just said, hey little brother, I love you. And I get those text messages from him all the time, but it was just like a reminder to be like, I can make it through this. And now I have, but it's still, I can't really say I've made it through it, because there's no end to it, if that makes sense. There's no point in my life where my family's gonna come around, or my parents especially are gonna come around. Usually when people hear my story, they're like, oh, your family will come around, don't worry about it. Everyone always comes around. And I'm just like, no, they're not going to. I'm the guy caught in the middle, because there's parts of me that want to defend my family, and then there's other parts of me that I'm like, well, why did they do this to me? Especially being here in New York City this summer, when you see your fellow interns or your fellow friends that you're making, their parents don't care that they're gay. I'm so happy for them, but it's so painful at the same time. It makes me so angry that I can't have my parents because I'm gay. I have moments where I think I'm like what it could be if my family was okay with me being gay. And those are sometimes the most painful experiences I have to like just push through because they happen randomly. It's like the other day on the subway, I was like, I really wish I could go home for Christmas. Or I'll be like, I wish 5 years from now that I could go home with a boy for Christmas and it'd be fine. I really wish that could be my life. I just still have those moments that I don't get holidays with my parents anymore. It's the holidays are the hardest. So hard. I know I'm with my adopted family now, the LGBT family. I'm with them, but there's still traditions and things that I don't get to be a part of anymore. And I wish I could be gay and still go home. After going through everything, I'm very proud of myself for being who I am and taking control of my life and not letting other people control it. I have a lot of things going great for me. I'm very proud of who I am. I'm glad I'm gay.